I've been married to Emily for 13 years now. We met when we were both in our mid-20s, and I remember thinking, this is it. We had that connection that felt like it could stand the test of time. We were both young, excited about the future, and ready to build a life together. We bought our first house, started our family, and navigated life's challenges, one step at a time. Our 3 kids, Ella, Max, and Sophie, were the joy of our lives, and despite the chaos that often came with raising young children, it felt like we were a team, until everything changed. It was a gradual shift at first. Emily had always struggled with ADHD, and she'd been prescribed Adderall to help manage her symptoms. It seemed to work well for her, at least, it did for a long time. But looking back now, I can see that something inside of her began to shift. I didn't notice it immediately, but there were signs. She started to get more agitated, a little more jittery, a little more withdrawn. And then the insomnia kicked in. I didn't know how bad it was at first because she kept it hidden from me. But eventually it all came to a head. Emily had been abusing her Adderall for a while, and when she went into withdrawal, it was like everything came crashing down in one brutal moment. That month, she lost her job. She had been working as a project manager for a local company, and the stress of trying to manage both her personal life and her job was too much. She'd been losing focus, missing deadlines, and ultimately, her boss had to let her go. It was one of those moments that changes everything. She came home that night, and I could tell something was wrong. I didn't know the details yet, but I could feel the weight of it in the air. She was devastated, but it wasn't just about the job. She was ashamed of herself, of her actions, and of the way she had let things spiral out of control. She told me that she'd been struggling with her severe anemia again, that she wasn't able to concentrate, that the fatigue was just too much for her to handle. She said it was the anemia that had caused everything. And for a moment, I believed her. I loved her, and I wanted to believe that she was telling me the truth. But after everything that happened, I can see now that I was blind to the real problem. It wasn't just her anemia. It was the fact that she had been abusing her medication for months, and that had caused a domino effect that neither of us was ready for. When the withdrawal symptoms hit her hard, she was a shell of the person I had known. She couldn't focus, couldn't sleep, and was constantly on edge. There were days when she couldn't even get out of bed. Her anxiety was so overwhelming that it was hard to even have a conversation with her without her becoming agitated. I had to step in and take control. I went through her prescription, kept track of the doses, and made sure she was getting the help she needed. We agreed to find a new job for her, one that was less stressful, and I did everything I could to help her get back on track. But I was still oblivious to how deep the addiction had gone. Things seemed to stabilize for about 1.5 years after that. Emily was in a better place, at least that's what I thought. She had a new job that she liked, we were getting by, and the kids were thriving. It felt like we had started to rebuild, brick by brick, the life we had once known. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. I thought I was just being paranoid, that everything was fine, but then the charges started showing up. It wasn't anything big at first, just small charges at this nutrition store around the corner. $80 here, $80 there. I didn't think much of it at first, but then they started coming more frequently. I asked her about it, and she explained it away, saying she was buying energy drinks for work. She told me it helped her stay awake and focus during the day. She was always a little tired, so I didn't question it too much. But the truth was, it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was going on. One day, I found out the real story. The nutrition store wasn't selling energy drinks. Instead, they were selling nootropics, pills that contained tianeptine, a substance known as gas station heroin. I had no idea what that meant at the time, but I soon learned. Emily wasn't just buying a few energy drinks, she was buying drugs. She was deep into this new addiction, and I had no idea. When I confronted her about it, she broke down, apologized, and promised she would stop. She admitted that she knew it was dangerous and that she couldn't keep doing it. I wanted to believe her, but I had my doubts. I had seen this before, and I couldn't ignore the reality that she was lying to me. At first, it felt like we were making progress. I took control of her medication again, managing the doses and making sure she wasn't using anything she shouldn't. I kept a close eye on her, even when she swore that she had stopped with the nootropics. But then, things started to spiral again. It was months later when she called me, her voice shaky, her breath ragged. She told me she couldn't breathe and was shaking uncontrollably. She was in full-blown panic mode. A coworker drove her home, and when she got here, she was a wreck. I asked her what happened, but it took her hours to come clean. The nutrition store had stopped selling the nootropics, and she had turned to taking stack or 2 pills, 60 at a time. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I thought we had passed this point, but here we were again. I had no choice but to get her family involved. Together, we convinced her to go into inpatient rehab. It felt like a turning point. I wanted to believe that this was the solution, that she would finally get the help she needed. I thought we could fix things, that we could get back to the way we used to be. But the moment she entered rehab, things only got worse. The first week, she was still texting me regularly, calling the kids on Zoom. Everything seemed fine, like she was starting to turn things around. But then came the family therapy session, the first real attempt at addressing what was happening. I was unprepared for what happened next. Emily didn't want to work through our issues. She didn't want to rebuild our marriage. Instead, she spent the entire session tearing into me, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong in our relationship. She said I hadn't been there for her, that I hadn't supported her enough, that I didn't understand her needs. She wouldn't even look at me, her back turned the entire time. I was floored. I had been there for her through everything, through her addiction, her job loss, her struggles, but it was clear that she had already made up her mind. She didn't want to fix things with me, she wanted to fix herself, and I wasn't part of the equation anymore. Just days later, she made another move that felt like a betrayal. She switched her payroll direct deposit to her Venmo account, without telling me. She asked for her Venmo card so she could send money. I gave it to her without question. I thought she was trying to pay off some bills, trying to get things in order. But then she told me that she wanted to separate. She said we needed time apart to work on ourselves, before we could work on our marriage. I knew instantly that it wasn't real. It wasn't about working on our marriage, it was about getting away from me. I called her therapist multiple times, trying to get answers, but nobody would listen. It was like I had been shut out of the process completely. Days turned into weeks, and I was told that I had been removed as her contact. No explanation, just that I wasn't allowed to communicate with her anymore. It hurt more than I can put into words. I had been there for her through everything, through all of the pain, the lies, the addiction, and now, I was being cast aside. I couldn't understand it. No one would listen to me, and everyone told me that I was being unstable, because I wasn't letting go. But I knew something was wrong. After 13 years of marriage, I knew my wife, and this wasn't her. She had changed. Desperate for answers, I started searching for any sign that could explain what was happening. I joined NA and non-therapy groups, hoping to find some kind of guidance. That's when I heard about the 13th step. I had no idea what it meant, but when I Googled it, I found out the ugly truth. It was a term used to describe romantic involvement between people in recovery, something that was supposed to be a major red flag. I started digging deeper, checking her phone records, calling numbers I didn't recognize. One of those calls led me to a man she had met in rehab. The truth came crashing down. Emily had been sending this guy nude photos, flirting with him, and even hooked up with him once before he left rehab. I was crushed. I confronted her, but she called me a piece of shit for accusing her of cheating after 13 years of marriage. I had to show her the proof, those nude photos she had sent him, and when I did, I disconnected her phone. That wasn't the end of it, though. When I tried to tell the rehab facility what was happening, they shrugged it off. They said they had no control over what she chose to do romantically. And then, to make it even worse, they tried to label me as unstable to the state. I was furious. They were supposed to be taking care of her. They were supposed to help her, not enable her to destroy everything. Now, it's been weeks since I last heard from her. She hasn't called or asked about the kids. It's like she's completely checked out of our lives. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel lost. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive her for what she's done. She sent me a letter in the mail the other day, blaming me for her addiction, saying I should have gotten her help sooner. She even claimed I only benefited from her addiction. Like I wanted any of this to happen. Like I wanted my life to fall apart.